What does all this have to do with us who are trying to lead as best we can a sober Orthodox Christian life? It has a lot to do with it. We have to realize that the life around us, abnormal though it is the place where we begin our own Christian life. Whatever we make of our life, whatever truly Christian content we give to it, it still has something of the stamp of the me generation on it. And we have to be humble enough to see this, that this is where we begin. There are two false approaches to the life around us that many often make today, thinking that somehow this is what Orthodox Christians should be doing. One approach, the most common one, is simply to go along with the times. Adapt yourself to rock music, modern fashions and tastes, and the whole rhythm of our jazzed-up modern life. Often the more old-fashioned parents will have little contact with this life and live their own life more or less separate from it. But they will smile when they see their children follow after the latest craze and think that this is something harmless. This path is total disaster if we want to live a Christian life. It is something that produces the death of the soul. There are some who can still lead an outwardly respectable life without struggling against the spirit of the times, which is manifest in all these popular movements. But inwardly, such people are dead or dying. And the saddest thing of all, their children will pay the price in various psychic and spiritual disorders and sicknesses, which become more and more commonplace. There are a few examples I might give. One of the leading members of the suicide cult that ended so spectacularly 4 years ago in Jonestown was the young daughter of a Greek Orthodox priest. Satanic rock groups like KISS, Kids in Satan's Service, are made up of ex-Russian Orthodox young people. The largest part of the membership of the Temple of Satan in San Francisco, according to a recent sociological survey, is made up of Orthodox boys. These are only a few striking cases. Most Orthodox young people don't go so far astray. They just blend in with the anti-Christian world around them and cease to be examples of any kind of Christianity to those who look at them. This, of course, is wrong if we take Christianity seriously. The Christian must be different from the world, above all from today's weird, abnormal world. And this must be one of the basic things he knows as part of his Christian upbringing. Otherwise, there is no point in calling ourselves Christians at all, much less Orthodox Christians. The false approach at the other extreme is what one might call fake spirituality. As translations of Orthodox books on the spiritual life become more widely available and the Orthodox vocabulary of spiritual struggle is placed more and more in the air, one finds an increasing number of people talking about hesychasm, the Jesus prayer, the ascetic life, exalted states of prayer, and all manner of things like that. And the most exalted Holy Fathers like St. Simeon the New Theologian, St. Gregory of Palamas, St. Gregory the Sinite, and many others. It is all, of course, very well to be aware of this truly exalted side of Orthodox spiritual life, and to have reverence for the great saints who have actually lived it. But unless we have a very realistic and very humble awareness of how far away all of us today are from the life of hesychasm, and how little prepared we are even to approach it, our interest in it will be only one more expression of our self-centered plastic universe. The me generation goes hesychast. That is what some people are trying to do today. But in actuality, they're only adding a new game called hesychasm to the attractions of Disneyland. There are books on the subject now, very popular. In fact, Roman Catholics are going in very big for this kind of thing, under Orthodox influence, and themselves influencing other Orthodox people. For example, there is a Jesuit priest, Maloney, who writes all kinds of books. And translations, St. Macarius the Great, St. Simeon the Theologian, tries to get people in everyday life to be hesychasts and have all kinds of retreats, usually charismatic. People are inspired by the Holy Spirit, supposedly, and undertake all kinds of these disciplines which we get from Holy Fathers, which are far beyond the level in which we are today. It's a very unserious thing. There's also a lady, in fact she was born in Russia, became a Catholic, who writes books called Pustinia, about the desert life today. Malchania, the silent life, and all these things which she tries to sort of put into life like you'd have some fashion for some kind of new candy. And this, of course, is very unserious, and it's a very tragic sign of our times, that these kind of exalted things are being used by people who have no idea what they're all about. For some people it's only a habit or a pastime. For other people who take it seriously, it can be a great tragedy. And they think they're leading some kind of exalted life, and really they haven't even come to terms with their own problems inside them. Let me then re-emphasize that both these extremes are to be avoided, both worldliness and super-spirituality. But this does not mean that we should not have a realistic awareness of the legitimate demands which the world makes upon us, or that we should cease respecting and taking sound instruction from the great Hesychast fathers and using the Jesus prayer ourselves according to our circumstances and capacity. It just has to be on our level, down to earth. The point is, and this point is absolutely necessary for our survival as Orthodox Christians in these perilous times, we must realize our situation as Orthodox Christians today. We must realize deeply what times we are living in, how little we actually know and feel our orthodoxy, how far we are not just from the saints of ancient times, we can't even touch them, but even from the ordinary Orthodox Christians of 100 years ago, or even a generation ago, and how much we must humble ourselves just to survive as Orthodox Christians. More specifically, what can we do to gain this awareness, this realization, and how can we make it fruitful in our lives? I will try to answer this question in two parts. First, concerning our awareness of the world around us, which as never before in the history of Christianity has become our conscious enemy. And second, concerning our awareness of orthodoxy, which I'm afraid most of us know much less than we should, and much less than we have to know if we wish to keep it. First, since whether we wish it or not, we are in the world, and its effects are felt strongly wherever you are today, even in a remote place like our monastery here. Therefore, we must face it and its temptations squarely and realistically, but without giving in to it. In particular, we must prepare our young people for the temptations facing them, and, as it were, inoculate them against these temptations. We must be aware that the world around us seldom helps and almost always hinders the upbringing of a child in the true Orthodox spirit. We must be ready every day to answer the influence of the world by the principles of a sound Christian upbringing. This means, to go into a few more specific points, that what a child learns at school must be constantly checked and corrected at home. You can't assume what he's going to learn in school is something simply that's profitable or secular and has nothing to do with his orthodox outlook on life. A generation ago you could have assumed that more or less. Now, no longer can do that. A child may be taught useful skills and facts in schools, although many schools in America today are failing miserably even at this. In fact, many school teachers tell us that all they can do is keep the children in good order in class without even teaching them anything. But even if he gets this much, which few are getting yet, he is also taught many wrong attitudes in philosophy. A child's basic attitude towards an appreciation of literature, music, history, art, philosophy, even science, and of course life and religion, must come first of all not from school, because the school will give you this all mixed up with modern philosophies. It must come first from the home and the church, or else a child is bound to be miseducated in today's world. Our public education is at best agnostic and at worst openly atheistic or anti-religious. Of course, in the Soviet Union, all this is forced upon the child. There's no religion whatsoever, and there's an active program of making the child atheist. In America, it's not so bad. Perhaps in some places it's getting that bad, but not as bad. Another point, parents must know exactly what is being taught their children in sex education courses, which are almost universal today in American schools. And this must be corrected at home, not only by a frank attitude to this subject, especially between fathers and sons, a very rare thing in American society, but also by a clear setting forth of the moral aspect, which is totally absent in public education. Another point, parents must know just what kind of music their children are listening to, what is in the movies they see, listening and seeing together with them when necessary, what kind of language they're exposed to, what kind of language they use, and various other points of common everyday life, and there must be a Christian answer, a Christian attitude given to all of this. Television, in households where there is not enough courage to throw it out the window, must be strictly controlled and supervised to avoid the poisonous effects of this machine which has become the leading educator of anti-Christian attitudes and ideas in the home itself, especially to the young. I speak about the raising of children because this is where the world first strikes its blows at Orthodox Christians and forms them in its image. Once wrong attitudes have been formed in a child, the task of giving him a Christian education becomes doubly difficult. But it is not only children, it is all of us who are facing the world which is trying to form us in anti-Christianity. By means of schools, television, movies, popular music, and all the other influences that pound in upon us, most of all in the big cities. And we have to be aware that what is being pounded in upon us it's all of one piece. It has a certain rhythm, a certain message to give us, this message of self-worship, of relaxing, of letting go, of enjoying yourself, of giving up any thought of the world. In various forms, whether in music or in movies, television, what's being taught in schools, the way subjects are emphasized, the way the background is given, and everything else is one particular thing that is being given to us. It's actually an education in unbelief. In the Soviet Union, it's an education in atheism. We have to fight back by knowing just what the world is trying to do to us and by formulating and communicating our Orthodox Christian response to it. Frankly, from observing the way Orthodox families in today's world live and pass on their orthodoxy, it would seem that this battle is more often lost than won. The percentage of Orthodox Christians who retain their Orthodox identity intact and are not changed into the image of today's world is rather small. I don't mean just people who continue to go to church on Sundays, because many people going to church on Sundays are not very aware of what their religion is all about. However, having said this much, I must say now that it is not necessary to view the world around us as all bad. If it was, there would be almost no hope for us. In fact, for our survival as Orthodox Christians, we have to be smart enough to use whatever is positive in the world for our benefit. And here I'll go into a few points where we can use something in the world which seems to be nothing to do directly with Orthodoxy in order to formulate our Orthodox worldview. For example, the child who has been exposed from his earliest years to good classical music and has seen his soul being developed by it will not be nearly as tempted by the crude rhythms and message of rock and other contemporary forms of pseudo-music as someone who has grown up without a musical education. Such a musical education, as several of the Opton elders have said, refines the soul and prepares it for the reception of spiritual impressions. The child, second point, the child who has been educated in good literature, drama, and poetry, and has felt their effect in his own soul, that is, has really enjoyed them, will not easily become an addict of the contemporary movies and television programs and cheap novels which devastate the soul and take it away from the Christian path. Another point, the child who has learned to see beauty in classical painting and sculpture will not easily be drawn into the perversity of contemporary art or be attracted by the garish products of modern advertising and pornography. Another very important point, the child who knows something of the history of the world, especially in Christian times, and how other people have lived and thought, what mistakes and pitfalls people have fallen into by departing from God and His commandments, and what glorious and influential lives they have lived when they were faithful to Him, will be discerning about the life and philosophy of our own times, and will not be inclined to follow the first new philosophy or way of life he encounters. One of the basic problems facing people educating children today is that in the schools they are no longer given a sense of history, that anybody has lived before us. Anybody who knows anything about history before the Second World War is considered ancient history. Actually, it's a very dangerous, fatal kind of a thing to give a child, because it means he has no ability to take examples from the way people lived in the past. And actually, history constantly repeats itself. Once you see that, it becomes interesting. It becomes interesting how people are falling into the same traps today. And you begin to see how you can answer this, how people have answered it in the past, how there have been people who went against God and what results came from that, and how people changed their lives and became exceptions and gave an example which has lived down to our own time. Therefore, this sense of history is a very important thing that should be communicated. In general, the person who is well acquainted with the best products of secular culture, which in the West almost always have definite religious and Christian overtones, has a much better chance of leading a normal, fruitful, Orthodox life than someone who knows only the popular culture of today. One who is converted to Orthodoxy straight from rock culture, anyone who thinks he can combine Orthodoxy with that kind of culture, has much suffering to go through and a difficult road in life before he can become a truly serious Orthodox Christian, who is capable of handing on his faith to others. Without this suffering, without this awareness, Orthodox parents will raise children who will be devoured by the contemporary world around us. The world's best culture, properly received, refines and develops the soul. Today's popular culture cripples and deforms the soul and hinders it from having a full and normal response to the message of Orthodoxy. Therefore, in our battle against the spirit of this world, we can use the best things the world has to offer in order to go beyond them. Everything good in the world, if we are only wise enough to see it, points to God and to Orthodoxy, and we have to make use of it.